In a grim escalation of hostilities in the ongoing conflict between Russia and Ukraine, Kyiv endured a relentless 5-hour drone assault that left one woman dead and multiple civilians injured. This attack, which occurred overnight on June 9, 2025, is part of a broader wave of aerial bombardments that have intensified across Ukraine, signaling a significant uptick in violence as both sides grapple with the ramifications of prolonged warfare. The Ukrainian capital was targeted as Russian forces launched a reported 315 drones and 7 missiles, with the primary focus on civilian infrastructure. Local officials confirmed that at least 7 fatalities occurred across the nation during this period, with 2 men killed in the port city of Odesa, where a maternity ward was also damaged. Kyiv's mayor Vitaly Klitschko described the assault as one of the most severe the city has faced throughout the conflict, highlighting the emotional toll such attacks take on the population. Russian strikes are once again hitting not military targets but the lives of ordinary people, lamented Timur Tkachenko, the head of Kyiv's military district. President Volodymyr Zelenskyy responded to these strikes by emphasizing their detrimental impact on peace efforts. He stated that the barrage of missiles and drones drowns out global calls for a ceasefire, underscoring the continuous struggle for a diplomatically viable resolution to the conflict. It is vital that the response to this and other similar Russian attacks is not silence from the world but concrete action, he asserted, calling for stronger mediators to facilitate discussions between Ukraine and Russia. In a related development, the Kremlin has been engaging in talks regarding the exchange of deceased soldiers, a process that remains fraught with tension. Despite ongoing negotiations, the atmosphere remains charged, as both sides continue to accuse each other of failing to adhere to agreements made in previous discussions. Zelenskyy remarked that Russia's tactics often involve stalling and presenting ultimatums that Ukraine cannot accept, further complicating efforts for peace. The latest drone attacks come on the heels of a 3-day wave of aerial bombardments that included Russia's largest drone strike to date, which reportedly involved over 600 drones. These events have prompted Moscow to call for a UN Security Council meeting, citing alleged European threats to international peace and security, a move interpreted by many as an attempt to deflect attention from its own aggressive actions in Ukraine. Military analysts suggest that these assaults serve not only to inflict physical damage but also to undermine the morale of the Ukrainian populace. Professor Michael Clark noted that while the strategic impact of the drone strikes might be limited, the psychological warfare they represent is significant. Civilians across Ukraine are forced into air raid shelters, disrupting their lives and fostering a climate of fear. As the conflict endures, the international community watches with bated breath. The prospect of renewed peace talks remains dim, with both sides entrenched in their positions. The ongoing violence and the humanitarian crisis it exacerbates call for immediate action, yet the path to peace appears shrouded in uncertainty. The question remains whether diplomatic efforts can rise above the din of warfare or if the cycle of retaliation will continue unabated. Looking forward, the situation in Ukraine remains precarious, with implications not only for its sovereignty but also for regional stability. As both military and diplomatic maneuvers unfold, the hope for a peaceful resolution hangs in the balance, challenging leaders worldwide to act decisively in the face of escalating aggression. In a harrowing escalation of hostilities, Kyiv was subjected to a relentless 5-hour drone assault overnight, marking one of the most significant attacks in the ongoing war between Russia and Ukraine. This unprecedented wave of aggression underscores the ongoing volatility in a conflict that has already claimed countless lives and reshaped the geopolitical landscape of Eastern Europe. On June 10, 2025, the Ukrainian capital faced a barrage of over 315 drones and 7 missiles launched by Russian forces, with the majority targeting urban areas. The airstrikes resulted in the death of at least one woman in the Obolin district of Kyiv and left numerous others injured. This is a heavy and painful loss, noted Timur Tkachenko, a local official who emphasized that these strikes are not merely military actions but attacks on the lives of ordinary citizens. Fires broke out across several districts, further complicating emergency response efforts as firefighters battled the blazes amid continuing danger. President Volodymyr Zelenskyy characterized the assault as one of the largest of the war, stating that such actions drown out global efforts for peace and calling for stronger international mediation in the beleaguered negotiations with Russia. "We want to end the war, but this requires the will of both parties," he remarked, highlighting the challenges faced in achieving any form of resolution. His comments reflect a growing frustration with the stalled peace process, especially as recent negotiations have revealed Russia's reluctance to engage constructively. The strikes on Kyiv were part of a broader pattern of attacks that also targeted the southern port city of Odesa, where civilian infrastructure, including a maternity ward, was damaged. Governor Ola Kuiper reported that 2 people died in this attack, which also injured several others. "The enemy struck at the very heart of our identity again," lamented Mykola Toketsky, Ukraine's culture minister, referring to the damage inflicted on St. Sophia Cathedral, a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Military analysts indicate that while these drone assaults create significant psychological pressure on the civilian population, their tactical impact on the battlefield remains debatable. Professor Michael Clark noted that while the drones instill fear and disrupt daily life, the real strategic advantage for Russia lies in its use of precision munitions capable of affecting frontline combat. "The drones are certainly bringing misery to the civilian population, but whether they are making a tactical difference is another question," he stated. As the conflict continues, the toll on human life remains staggering. In the last 24 hours alone, at least 7 individuals were reported killed and numerous others injured across Ukraine. Regional authorities confirmed casualties not just in Kyiv but also in Odesa, Dnipro, and Donetsk, where attacks persisted. The Kremlin has indicated ongoing discussions with Ukrainian officials regarding the exchange of deceased soldiers, reflecting a complex and often contradictory nature of negotiations amid escalated violence. Such conversations highlight a potential avenue for dialogue, although the path to genuine peace remains fraught with difficulties. As the world watches, the situation in Ukraine is evolving rapidly, with the potential for further escalations looming large. The international community is urged to respond not with silence but with decisive action against the backdrop of a conflict that continues to reshape not just Ukraine, but the security landscape of Europe as a whole. Future developments will undoubtedly hinge on both military dynamics and the political will of global powers to engage effectively in mediating a resolution to this tragic conflict. In the midst of Russia's ongoing conflict with Ukraine, a remarkable figure has emerged as a potent symbol of resistance against President Vladimir Putin's regime. Daria Serenko, a 32-year-old poet and activist, has become an emblem of defiance, leading the Feminist Anti-War Resistance movement, which has rallied thousands of women across Russia to protest against the war. While Putin is known for his iron-fisted control over dissent, the quiet strength and articulate opposition embodied by Serenko pose a unique challenge to his authority. Since the inception of her movement on February 29, 2022, the second day of the Ukraine war, Serenko has galvanized women to voice their opposition to the conflict. Despite the Kremlin's attempts to silence her, including designating her as a foreign agent and banning her published works, Serenko has continued her activism from exile in Georgia, where she fled after being imprisoned for 2 weeks at the war's outset. "Feminists are the most visible political power in the opposition. We have become actors on the streets across Russia," she remarked in an interview, demonstrating both her resolve and the growing visibility of women's voices in the anti-war movement. The Feminist Anti-War Resistance has orchestrated hundreds of protests in over 60 cities, utilizing innovative methods to spread their message. Activists have taken to social media and public spaces, distributing poignant anti-war poetry and testimonials from Ukrainian women affected by the conflict. One such poem poignantly reflects a war again. No one talks about it, capturing the disillusionment many feel in response to the ongoing violence. Serenko's situation underscores the broader implications of Putin's crackdown on dissent, particularly against women. The Russian president's regime has increasingly targeted female activists, perceiving them as a significant threat to his hyper-masculine vision of power. The crackdown has extended to bans on literature that challenges state narratives, and efforts starkly illustrated when authorities removed Serenko's poetry collection from bookstores with an operative's chilling remark, "You don't have to burn the books, just make sure people stop reading them." Despite the risks, Serenko's passion for activism remains undeterred. She recalls a pivotal moment in her career when her employer at the Ministry of Culture issued an ultimatum: either cease her activism or be fired. Choosing the latter. Serenko has since dedicated herself to advocating for women's rights and anti-war sentiments even amid personal threats and persecution. The plight of women in Russia has grown increasingly perilous, particularly following Putin's decision to decriminalize domestic violence in 2021. Serenko has drawn attention to this issue, emphasizing the urgent need to address violence against women in a society where systemic oppression is rampant. "We have to stop the killings of women. Russia is one of the worst countries in terms of protecting women from violence," she asserts, highlighting a grim reality faced by many. As the war continues to wreak havoc, Serenko remains focused on fostering a network of activists, emphasizing the importance of underground collaboration to evade government scrutiny. "We continue to unite feminist activists in Russia, but we are careful. No feminist group can be officially affiliated with us, that's too dangerous," she explains. Through this careful organization, she seeks to educate and empower women, advocating for reproductive justice and historical awareness. The recent escalation of conflict in Ukraine, including drone strikes on civilian areas in Kyiv and other regions, underscores the dire need for voices like Serenko's. As Russia continues to exert military pressure, the personal and collective struggles of women become even more critical in the fight for peace and justice. Looking ahead, the future of the feminist anti-war resistance and Serenko's efforts will be pivotal in shaping public discourse within Russia. With global attention increasingly focused on the plight of those opposing Putin's regime, Serenko's voice stands as a beacon of hope and resistance against authoritarianism. As she aptly states, "Don't be afraid of becoming an alarmist. The dictatorship develops slowly, but at some point, you find yourself in a boiling pot." Her call to action resonates not only within Russia but also with those globally who champion human rights and the fight against oppression. As the conflict in Ukraine escalates, the urgency for international support has never been more pronounced. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy has issued a clarion call for allies to take decisive action as Russian missile and drone strikes intensify, marking one of the most severe periods of aerial bombardment since the onset of the invasion in 2022. With reports of record-breaking assaults, the situation remains critical, prompting a plea for enhanced military aid from Western nations. In a recent interview with ABC News, Zelenskyy expressed deep concern over the United States' decision to redirect military resources initially promised to Ukraine, specifically a staggering 20,000 missiles to the Middle East. "We counted on them to defend against Russian attacks," he stated, emphasizing the dire implications of this shift in focus. The U.S. has reportedly decided to bolster its own forces in response to rising tensions in the region, leaving Ukraine's defense against a relentless Russian offensive in jeopardy. The timing of these developments coincides with a dramatic uptick in Russian aggression. Over the weekend, the Ukrainian Air Force reported an unprecedented assault involving 479 drones and 20 missiles aimed at various Ukrainian targets, an attack characterized as an absolute record for Russian aerial engagements. This onslaught included the use of Iranian-made Shahid drones, which have become a staple of Russia's strategy in the conflict. Zelenskyy highlighted the importance of advanced anti-drone technology to counteract these threats, noting that the assets being diverted are crucial for defending against such assaults. In the wake of these attacks, which included strikes on civilian infrastructure and even a maternity hospital in Odesa, the humanitarian toll has been severe. Zelenskyy reported that the latest barrage resulted in multiple casualties, including fatalities. He described the assault as one of the largest attacks on Kyiv, with significant impacts felt across the Odesa, Dnipro, and Chernihiv regions. The Ukrainian president's assertion that for yet another night instead of a ceasefire there were massive strikes underscores the relentless nature of the conflict, as Russia appears to be doubling down on its military efforts despite international calls for peace. The situation is further complicated by the ongoing geopolitical dynamics as the West navigates its responses to multiple crises. The Pentagon has not confirmed the reallocation of military assets, leaving Ukraine in a precarious position as it braces for continued Russian offensives. Zelensky's appeal for action is not merely a request for supplies but a desperate call for solidarity in the face of aggression that threatens not only Ukraine but the broader stability of Europe. As the conflict persists, the implications for diplomatic relations and military strategy in the region remain profound. The Ukrainian government is actively seeking to engage its allies to bolster support amid these challenging circumstances. The continuing violence and humanitarian crises have prompted renewed discussions about the need for a unified response and a re-evaluation of military commitments to ensure that Ukraine can effectively defend its sovereignty. Looking ahead, it is clear that the situation in Ukraine remains fluid. The coming weeks will be critical as both military and diplomatic channels are tested, with the potential for further escalations and the ongoing humanitarian crisis. The international community faces pressing questions about how best to support Ukraine while addressing the multifaceted challenges that arise from the conflict. As Zelenskyy continues to rally support, the hope remains that a concerted effort can forge a path toward peace and stability in the region.